Hey guys, tonight we're going to step back, way back, about 1,000 years or more, and ease into a world that felt different. Imagine, if you can, the dense, humid air of the Mesoamerican lowlands settling around you as the sun begins its slow descent. You're walking a well-worn path, maybe carrying a woven basket, heading back towards the familiar site of your home, not a sprawling mansion, mind you, but a solid, comfortable structure, perhaps with walls of wattle and daub, topped with a thatched roof that blends into the surrounding greenery. And right there, spilling out from the edge of your dwelling, is something vibrant, essential, and utterly alive, your kitchen garden. This wasn't just a patch of dirt. It was the beating heart of your daily existence, a miniature ecosystem thriving just steps from your door. A place where sustenance wasn't bought or traded for miles away, but cultivated with your own hands, reflecting the very rhythm of your life. Now, let's be real for a second. You probably wouldn't survive a week trying to live exactly like this today without a serious crash course in jungle survival and plant identification, but understanding their connection to the earth is something genuinely beautiful. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're feeling up to it, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always cool to see how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at your dwelling, the sounds of the jungle softening into the familiar rustle of leaves and the distant chirping of insects. And there it is, your paw-pack-owl, the house garden. It's not laid out in neat, sterile rows like something you'd see in a modern suburban backyard, or, let's be honest, a perfectly curated Instagram feed. No, this feels more organic, more integrated. It's less about rigid order and more about harmonious coexistence. Think of it as a controlled explosion of green, right where you need it most. You step into the edge of the garden, the soft earth yielding slightly under your bare feet. The air here is different from the path. It's cooler, richer with the scent of damp soil, growing plants, and perhaps a hint of something cooking nearby. You see the familiar shapes, the broad leaves of squash sprawling along the ground, the tall stalks of maize reaching for the sky, and beans climbing the maze like eager children up a parent's leg. This trio, the legendary three sisters, maize, beans, and squash, forms the absolute bedrock of your diet. This isn't just a quaint historical fact, it's the fundamental agricultural innovation that powered Mayan civilization. They provided carbohydrates, protein, and essential vitamins in a neat, mutually beneficial package. The beans fix nitrogen in the soil, the squash provides ground cover to retain moisture and suppress weeds, and the maize provides a natural trellis for the beans. It's a brilliant, ancient example of polyculture. But your garden is far more than just the three sisters. Look closer. Tucked between the larger plants are smaller treasures. Herbs for medicine and flavoring, like epazote or cilantro. Yes, cilantro has been around that long, sorry to break it to the cilantro haters. Plants whose leaves or roots are edible, adding variety to your stews and tortillas. Maybe a small patch of chili peppers, adding that essential Mesoamerican kick to everything. You might even have a few fruit trees nearby, like papaya or avocado, providing shade and seasonal bounty. It's a dense, multi-layered system, maximizing the use of vertical and horizontal space. This garden isn't just a food source, it's an extension of your home, a living larder and pharmacy. It's where you come to gather ingredients for tonight's meal, where children learn the names and uses of plants, and where the connection to the earth feels most immediate. Unlike the larger milpa fields that might be located further away, requiring more labor and yielding bulk crops, the paw-pack-owl is your daily convenience store, your immediate source of freshness and variety. It's the difference between going to the supermarket for staples and just popping out to your own backyard for fresh basil or a tomato. Much less hassle, though you still have to do the growing part. Historians still argue whether these house gardens or the larger milpa fields were more critical to the average Mayan household's survival and prosperity. It likely varied depending on the region, the specific time period, and social status, but there's no doubt the paw-pack-owl provided crucial food security and dietary diversity right at your doorstep. It was your buffer against lean times, your source of special ingredients, and the place where you cultivated plants that might not be suited for large-scale field production. Consider the sheer efficiency. Every scrap of organic waste from the household, ash from the cooking fire, plant trimmings, even human and animal waste, carefully managed, hopefully, could be returned to this nearby plot, recycling nutrients directly back into the soil. It was a closed-loop system long before anyone invented the phrase circular economy. You weren't hauling nutrients in from somewhere else. You were managing what you had right there, creating a pocket of intense fertility. And speaking of quirky tidbits, did you know some Mayan gardens might have included plants specifically grown not just for food or medicine, but for practical items? Take the jicama plant, for instance. While its root is edible and delicious, its tough, fibrous vines could be used for making rope or netting. Or maybe cotton, grown on a small scale for weaving household textiles. These gardens were truly multi-purpose powerhouses, providing food, medicine, materials, and a deep connection to the plant world. It was like having a grocery store, pharmacy, and hardware store rolled into one, all within arm's reach. Except, less fluorescent lighting and more actual sunlight. As you stand there, taking in the scene, you appreciate the quiet hum of life. Bees buzz among the flowers, lizards dart through the undergrowth, and the leaves whisper in the gentle breeze. This isn't just farming, it's coexisting. It's recognizing that the garden is a living entity, part of the larger natural world that surrounds you. The boundary between the cultivated space and the wild jungle is blurred, with useful wild plants often encouraged to grow at the edges or even within the garden itself. The feeling is one of self-reliance, of connection, and of peace. You know where your food comes from, you understand the effort it takes to grow it, and you see the direct results of your labor every single day. There's a serenity in this direct relationship with the earth, a stark contrast to the complex, often anonymous food systems we navigate today. Your garden is a constant reminder of the cycles of nature, of growth and decay, of abundance, and the need for careful stewardship. This is just the beginning of our journey into these ancient spaces. We've only just stepped through the threshold, feeling the earth beneath our feet and seeing the vibrant life around us. There's so much more to uncover about why these gardens were designed this way, what they truly represented beyond simple sustenance, and the ingenious techniques that kept them thriving year after year without needing to call a fertilizer company. Because, spoiler alert, they didn't exist. You've felt the soil, seen the familiar shapes of the three sisters, and glimpsed the variety tucked within the paupakal. But as you stand there, the quiet hum of life around you tells a deeper story. This garden isn't just a pantry, it's a living pharmacy, a hardware store, maybe even a place of quiet contemplation. The ancient Maya didn't compartmentalize life like we do. Everything was interconnected, the physical, the spiritual, the practical. And their gardens reflected this holistic view perfectly. Beyond the calories and protein, these plants offered remedies for ailments. Imagine you wake up with a stomach ache after perhaps indulging a little too much in fermented maize drink. Hey, it was a different time, don't judge. Instead of reaching for an antacid bottle, which, spoiler alert, also didn't exist, you'd step outside. You know exactly which leaves to pick, perhaps episode again, known for its digestive properties, or maybe something else entirely. Crushed, brewed into a tea, or applied as a poultice, these garden plants were the first line of defense against illness. This wasn't just folk wisdom. The Maya had a sophisticated understanding of the medicinal properties of countless plants, knowledge passed down through generations. Mainstream historical fact incoming, Mayan herbal medicine was incredibly advanced, with texts like the Ritual of the Back Abs documenting intricate healing rituals and plant-based remedies for a vast array of conditions, from snake bites to spiritual afflictions. Your garden was your immediate access point to this ancient pharmacopoeia. It wasn't just about healing either. Plants provided materials for daily life. Remember that quirky tidbit about jicama vines being used for rope? That's just one example. Small-scale cultivation of cotton might provide fibers for spinning thread and weaving cloth right there at home. Dyes could be extracted from roots, leaves, or berries grown in or near the garden, coloring textiles and other items. Reeds or specific grasses might be cultivated for mat weaving or roofing repairs. Think of your garden as a tiny, highly localized manufacturing center, providing raw materials for crafts and necessities, reducing the need to venture further afield or rely on trade for everything. It was like having a sustainable craft store attached to your house, except everything was green and required sunlight. And then there's the spiritual dimension. The Maya saw the natural world, including their cultivated spaces, as deeply sacred. Plants weren't just resources. They were living beings with spirits, connected to the gods and the cycles of creation and destruction. Specific plants held particular symbolic meaning. Maize, of course, was paramount, the very substance from which humanity was believed to have been created according to the Popol Vuh. Growing maize in your pa'pakal wasn't just about food. It was participating in that sacred creation story, nurturing the substance of life itself right at your doorstep. Other plants were used in rituals, offerings, or as symbols of fertility, growth, or connection to the underworld. The garden wasn't just soil and plants. It was a miniature cosmos, reflecting the larger spiritual universe of the Maya. Historians still argue whether the spiritual significance of certain plants influenced their presence and arrangement in the domestic garden as much as practical needs did, or if the spiritual meaning developed because of their fundamental importance in daily life. It's a classic chicken and egg situation in archaeology. Beyond the strictly practical and spiritual, these gardens fostered a deep connection to the environment. By working with the soil, observing the weather, understanding the needs of each plant, you developed an intimate relationship with the cycles of nature. You learned to read the subtle signs of the seasons, the health of the soil, the presence of beneficial insects versus pests. This wasn't abstract knowledge. It was lived experience, shaping your daily rhythm and understanding of the world. It's a connection many of us yearn for today, staring at screens instead of soil. These gardens also likely served as social hubs. Imagine neighbors exchanging seeds or cuttings, sharing knowledge about successful growing techniques, or helping each other with planting or harvesting during busy times. Children would play among the plants, absorbing knowledge about the natural world simply by being present. The garden wasn't just a private plot, it was part of the fabric of community life, a place where intergenerational knowledge was passed down organically, quite literally. It was the original community garden, just without the awkward sign-up sheets and passive-aggressive notes about watering. And let's not forget the subtle ecological benefits. A dense, multi-layered garden creates its own microclimate. The canopy of taller plants provides shade, keeping the soil cooler and reducing evaporation. The thick ground cover suppresses weeds and protects the soil from heavy rain erosion. The diversity of plants attracts a wider range of insects, birds, and other small animals, creating a more resilient ecosystem that helps keep pests in check naturally. Your garden wasn't just an isolated patch. It was a thriving, interconnected web of life, contributing to the health of the immediate environment around your home. It was essentially a tiny, self-regulating jungle designed for human convenience. So, as you look out over your pa'pakal, you see far more than just food growing. You see a living library of medicinal knowledge, a source of materials for craft and repair, a sacred space reflecting your deepest beliefs, a classroom for the next generation, and a vibrant ecosystem in miniature. It's a testament to a way of life where sustenance was interwoven with spirituality, community, and a profound understanding of the natural world. It wasn't just about survival. It was about living in harmony with the earth, drawing sustenance not just for the body, but for the mind and spirit too. This gentle cultivation, this serene integration with nature, feels incredibly resonant today, doesn't it? Especially when you consider the alternative ways we produce food now. You've felt the rich earth of your pa'pakal, seen the vibrant tapestry of life spilling out from your home. But to truly understand this intimate space, you need to zoom out just a little and look at the larger agricultural landscape the Mayan navigated. The foundation of their civilization, the engine that powered their cities and supported their population, was the milpa system. Think of the milpa as the main farm field, often located further from the home, requiring more labor, and primarily focused on growing staple crops like vast quantities of maize, beans, and squash for bulk sustenance and trade. It was a dynamic system, typically involving clearing a patch of forest, often using slash-and-burn techniques, though the sustainability of this varied greatly by region and time period, cultivating it intensely for a few years, and then letting it lie fallow for a much longer period to regenerate. Now your paw-pack-owl, your house garden, was intimately related to this larger milpa system, but it was also fundamentally different. It wasn't just a miniature milpa, it was an adaptation, a refinement, a sacred space reflecting the core principles of milpa agriculture but scaled down and intensified for daily, domestic life. The milpa was the engine of civilization, the paw-pack-owl was the beating heart of the home. The spiritual connection inherent in the milpa system was also deeply present in the paw-pack-owl. The Maya believed the earth was sacred, a living entity, and that working the land was a partnership with the divine. The cycles of planting, growth, death, and regeneration mirrored the larger cosmic cycles. This wasn't just a practical way to farm, it was a religious act. Mainstream historical fact incoming, rituals and ceremonies were integral to every stage of the milpa cycle, from clearing the land to planting, tending, and harvesting, seeking favor from deities like Yumcox, the god of wild plants and the forest, and Chak, the rain god. These beliefs were not confined to the large fields. They were brought right to your doorstep. In your paw-pack-owl, this spiritual connection felt even more personal, more immediate. You weren't just working a distant field. You were nurturing life right beside your home, in a space that was intertwined with your family's daily prayers and offerings. The three sisters, maize, beans, and squash, were not just food plants. They were sacred beings, gifts from the gods, embodying the very essence of life and creation. Tending them in your garden was a daily act of reverence. You might offer a small portion of your harvest back to the earth, or perform simple blessings over the seeds before planting. It was like having a tiny, edible shrine right outside your door. The practical adaptation of the milpa principles for the paw-pack-owl was equally ingenious. While the milpa relied on fallowing large areas to restore fertility, the paw-pack-owl couldn't afford that luxury. It needed to produce year-round, or as close to it as the climate allowed. So, the Maya developed techniques for maintaining fertility in a continuously cultivated space. This is where that carefully managed waste comes in again. Ash from the cooking fire, plant trimmings, food scraps, animal manure, if you had domestic animals like turkeys or dogs, all were returned to the garden soil, creating a pocket of intense, localized fertility. It was a form of composting and nutrient recycling that allowed the paw-pack-owl to sustain production without needing to abandon and clear new land like the milpa. It was the ultimate in closed-loop gardening, long before anyone worried about their carbon footprint, or had feet, for that matter. Just kidding, they definitely had feet. The polyculture principle, the three sisters, was a core element of both systems, but in the paw-pack-owl, it was often denser and more diverse. Remember that symphony of plants we glimpsed? That layering of different species, each serving multiple functions, food, medicine, materials, pest control, soil improvement, was a hallmark of the paw-pack-owl. It was the milpa's polyculture principle taken to the extreme, creating a highly complex, resilient mini-ecosystem. You weren't just growing a few crops, you were cultivating an entire functional community of plants. Historians still argue whether the spiritual significance of certain plants influenced their presence and arrangement in the domestic garden as much as practical needs did, or if the spiritual meaning developed because of their fundamental importance in daily life. Was the chili pepper grown because it was essential for flavor, or did its fiery nature give it spiritual significance that then made it important to cultivate at home? It's like asking if we value coffee because it wakes us up, or if we ritualize the morning coffee routine because it's just that good. A quirky tidbit about this adaptation: while the main milpa might focus on specific varieties of maize best suited for large-scale production, the paw-pack-owl could be where you cultivated heirloom varieties, plants with specific medicinal properties, or those used for dyes or fibers that weren't needed in bulk. It was a repository of biodiversity, preserving genetic diversity and specialized knowledge that might not be practical in the larger fields. It was like having your main farm grow commodity corn, but your backyard garden held all the weird, wonderful, and useful heritage varieties. This adaptation of the Milpa system for the home garden wasn't just about convenience. It was about creating a sustainable, resilient food source that was intimately connected to the household's needs and spiritual beliefs. It blended the agricultural wisdom of the Milpa with the intense nutrient cycling and biodiversity management required for continuous production in a confined space. It was a testament to their deep understanding of ecological principles and their ability to work with nature, not against it. The Pau-Pac-Ow was the domesticated heart of the wild Milpa system, bringing the power and sacredness of agriculture right to your doorstep. You've glimpsed the spiritual heart and the practical adaptation of the Milpa system in your Pau-Pac-Ow, bringing sacred agriculture right to your doorstep. But how, you might wonder, did this intense, continuously cultivated space remain so incredibly fertile year after year without chemical fertilizers or giant tractors churning in organic matter? This is where the ancient Mayan mastery of soil truly shines, a quiet, patient understanding of the earth's needs that feels almost magical compared to our modern methods. Step out into the garden again, feel the soil. It's not depleted or dusty, it feels rich, alive, perhaps even slightly spongy. The secret wasn't a single miracle product, but a combination of ingenious, low-tech techniques focused on nutrient cycling and building healthy soil structure. Remember that bit about waste? That wasn't just a quirky tidbit. It was fundamental. Every scrap of organic material produced by your household and the garden itself was seen not as trash, but as a precious resource to be returned to the earth. Ash from the cooking fire, loaded with potassium and other minerals? Back into the garden it goes. Plant trimmings, fallen leaves, spent stalks? Layered around the base of plants or incorporated into the soil's surface. Food scraps, non-meat, presumably, to avoid attracting unwanted critters? Also returned to the earth. Even human and animal waste, if managed properly through composting or designated areas away from edible plants, could be a source of valuable nutrients. This constant, deliberate recycling created a pocket of intense fertility right where it was needed most, directly feeding the plants you relied on daily. It was like having a tiny, hyper-efficient composting system built into your lifestyle, turning yesterday's dinner scraps into tomorrow's vegetables. Contrast this with the larger milpa fields. There, fertility was often restored by the long fallow period, allowing the forest to reclaim the land and build up nutrients naturally over years or even decades before being cleared again. The Pau-Pac-Ow couldn't wait that long. It needed a different approach, one that actively built and maintained fertility in place. This constant addition of organic matter didn't just add nutrients, it improved the soil structure. It made the soil more crumbly, allowing air and water to penetrate easily. It increased its ability to hold moisture during dry spells and drain excess water during heavy rains. It created a hospitable environment for beneficial microorganisms, earthworms, and other soil life that are essential for breaking down organic matter and making nutrients available to plants. It was like giving the soil a constant, healthy diet, ensuring it stayed strong and productive. Another key technique was the use of specific plants as green manure, or soil builders. While not always explicitly documented for the Pau-Pac-Ow, the principle from milpa agriculture likely applied. Certain legumes, like the beans in the Three Sisters system, fix nitrogen from the air into the soil. Growing these plants repeatedly in the same space, often rotated or intercropped, helped replenish this vital nutrient. Other plants with deep roots could break up compacted soil, bringing minerals up from lower layers. Plants with extensive surface roots help bind the soil together, preventing erosion, especially important in tropical downpours. It was gardening with an understanding of plant synergy, where different species work together to improve the soil for the benefit of the whole system. Historians still argue whether the specific composition and layering of plants in the Pau-Pac-Ow were primarily driven by maximizing space and yield, or by a conscious effort to mimic and enhance the natural soil-building processes observed in the surrounding jungle ecosystem. Were they intentionally designing for soil health, or was healthy soil simply a beneficial byproduct of their intensive, multi-layered planting style? It's another fascinating puzzle piece in understanding their motivations. A quirky tidbit: Some researchers speculate the Maya might have even used specific types of fungi or beneficial microbes to enhance soil health, perhaps by encouraging certain types of compost or using plant residues known to host beneficial organisms. While direct evidence is scarce for domestic gardens, their sophisticated understanding of plant interactions suggests this isn't outside the realm of possibility. Imagine cultivating your own beneficial soil microbes right alongside your tomatoes, or, ancient Mayan equivalents. Much less glamorous than brewing kombucha, but arguably way more impactful. The concept of mulching was also crucial. The sprawling leaves of squash, the fallen leaves from nearby trees, or deliberately applied plant residues created a protective layer on the soil surface. This mulch helped regulate soil temperature, keeping it cooler in the hot sun. It dramatically reduced water evaporation, meaning you didn't have to water as often, which we'll talk more about later. It suppressed weed growth, reducing the need for constant weeding. And as it decomposed, it added even more organic matter and nutrients to the soil. It was like giving the garden a cozy, nutrient-rich blanket that did multiple jobs at once. This wasn't about brute force or adding external inputs. It was about working with the natural processes of decomposition and nutrient cycling. It required observation, patience, and a deep respect for the earth. You learned to read the soil, its color, its texture, the life within it, understanding that healthy soil was the foundation of everything. Without healthy soil, the plants wouldn't thrive, the food wouldn't be nutritious, and the household wouldn't survive. Compare this to some modern agricultural practices that can deplete soil, requiring massive inputs of synthetic fertilizers to maintain yields. The ancient Maya, without any of that technology, managed to sustain fertility in a relatively small, intensely cultivated space for generations. It highlights a fundamental difference in philosophy, one focused on extraction and external inputs, the other on nurturing and internal cycling. Their soil wasn't just dirt, it was a living entity, a partner in the process of growing food. This mastery of soil wasn't just a technical skill, it was woven into their worldview. The earth was Pachamama, the Mother Earth, or similar deities depending on the specific Mayan group and time period. Caring for the soil was an act of reverence, a way of honoring the source of life. You didn't just take from the earth, you gave back, participating in a continuous cycle of giving and receiving. So, as you stand there, feeling the earth beneath your feet, you're touching soil that was cared for with ancient wisdom. It's soil that was fed, protected, and nurtured using techniques that were simple yet profoundly effective. Techniques that relied on understanding nature's cycles, recycling everything, and fostering a diverse community of life both above and below the ground. It's a quiet testament to their ingenuity and their deep connection to the land, a connection that allowed them to coax abundance from the earth right at their doorstep, year after year, without ever needing a trip to the garden center for a bag of fertilizer. You felt the richness of the soil, understood how they coaxed fertility from the earth itself. But even the most fertile soil is useless without water. And the Mesoamerican climate, especially in the lowlands, wasn't exactly predictable. You had seasons of intense, torrential downpours that could wash away everything, followed by long periods of scorching heat and drought. So, alongside their soil mastery, the ancient Maya were also incredibly clever water managers, especially in their precious papacal. Step back and look at your garden again, not just the plants, but the subtle contours of the earth. Notice how some areas might be slightly raised, creating small mounds or beds. This wasn't just for aesthetics, though maybe they appreciated a tidyish garden, who knows? Probably not. These raised areas were crucial for managing water, particularly during those sudden, violent tropical storms. By lifting the planting area slightly, you ensure that the plant roots aren't sitting in waterlogged soil, which can lead to root rot and kill the plant faster than you can say, "Jack, please stop." Excess water could drain away into the small channels or paths between the beds, protecting the delicate roots. It was like building tiny islands in a potential flood zone, ensuring your plants could breathe even when the heavens opened. But what about the dry season? When the sun beat down relentlessly and rain was a distant memory? This is where those soil techniques we just talked about became doubly important. Remember the concept of mulching? That protective layer of plant residues, fallen leaves, and sprawling squash vines on the soil surface. That wasn't just about adding nutrients and suppressing weeds. It was a brilliant, low-tech way to conserve moisture. The mulch acts like a blanket, shading the soil from the sun and drastically reducing evaporation. The water that does fall, or that you add, stays in the soil longer, available for plant roots when they need it most. It was like giving your garden a permanent, biodegradable sunblock that also happened to be delicious food for the soil life. And the healthy soil structure itself played a massive role. Soil that's rich in organic matter, crumbly and full of life, is like a sponge. It can absorb and hold much more water than compacted, depleted soil. So, all that effort put into recycling waste and building fertility wasn't just for nutrients. It was also creating soil that was inherently better at capturing and storing precious rainfall. It was gardening with an understanding that healthy soil is the best water reservoir you can have, miles better than any plastic barrel you might find in a modern garden store, which, again, didn't exist, probably for the best. Mainstream historical fact incoming. While domestic gardens used these smaller-scale techniques, the Maya civilization as a whole developed incredibly sophisticated, large-scale water management systems, particularly in their major cities. Places like Tikal and Palenque relied on complex networks of reservoirs, canals, and even paved plazas designed to capture and channel rainwater, storing vast quantities for the dry season. This wasn't just about agriculture. It was about supplying water for drinking, sanitation, and ceremonial purposes for tens of thousands of people. The principles of capturing, storing, and managing water were deeply ingrained in Mayan culture, applied from the grand scale of urban planning down to the intimate level of the house garden. Historians still argue whether the primary driver for developing such advanced water management techniques, both large-scale and domestic, was coping with unpredictable rainfall patterns, alternating droughts and floods, or specifically adapting to the challenges of supporting dense populations in environments with limited surface water sources. Was it about surviving the bad times, or enabling the good times on a massive scale? It's another layer of complexity in understanding their relationship with their environment. A quirky tidbit. Some researchers have proposed that the Maya might have used specific types of plants with particular root structures or growth habits to help manage water flow and prevent erosion on slopes within or near their gardens. While hard evidence for this in domestic plots is scarce, the concept of using plants as living architecture for water management is seen in larger Mayan landscape modifications, suggesting the knowledge was present. Imagine planting a specific type of grass or vine not just because it was useful, but because its roots would hold the soil on a slight incline, preventing your precious topsoil from washing away in a downpour. It's like having a living retaining wall, but much prettier and probably less prone to planning permission issues, mostly because planning permission didn't exist either. Beyond soil and structure, the Maya also likely practiced conscious water application when needed. While large-scale irrigation wasn't typical for the Paw-Pacow compared to other ancient civilizations, they would have needed to water during dry spells, especially for young or particularly thirsty plants. This would have been done manually, perhaps using gourds or woven baskets to carry water from a nearby cenote, river, or even a small household water collection system, like directing roof runoff into a container, a simple but effective technique. This manual watering fostered a direct relationship with the plant's needs. You weren't just turning on a tap, you were physically bringing the life-giving water, understanding the effort and preciousness involved. This wasn't about brute force or massive infrastructure within the home garden itself. It was about intelligent design, working with the materials and principles provided by nature. It was about creating a microclimate where water was conserved, drainage was managed, and the soil itself acted as a buffer against extremes. These simple, elegant techniques, mulching, soil building, raised beds, careful plant selection, were incredibly effective at ensuring the garden remained productive even when the weather wasn't cooperating. It was a quiet, continuous act of stewardship, ensuring that the source of daily sustenance was resilient in the face of environmental challenges. So, as you look out over your Paw-Pacow, you see not just plants and soil, but a subtle system of water management at play. The raised beds are silent sentinels against flooding, the mulch a protective blanket against the sun, the healthy soil a thirsty sponge holding on to every drop. It's a testament to their deep understanding of hydrology and their ability to apply that knowledge on a small, intimate scale, ensuring that the heart of their home remained vibrant and productive, come rain or shine. You've seen how the Maya coaxed fertility from the earth and managed precious water, creating a vibrant heart for their home. But even in this serene, sustainable space, life isn't always perfectly harmonious. The jungle is teeming with life, and not all of it is there to politely admire your prize-winning squash. Just like today, ancient Mayan gardeners had to contend with creatures who saw their carefully cultivated plants as a personal buffet. Pests, insects, rodents, birds, maybe even larger animals, were a constant challenge. So, how did they protect their precious paw-pack without reaching for a can of bug spray, another modern convenience they thankfully didn't have? Their approach was a blend of incredibly astute natural observation and deep-seated spiritual belief. Walk through the garden now, and look closely at the leaves. You might see evidence of chewing, a nibbled edge here, a tiny hole there. This is inevitable in any garden, especially one nestled so closely with the wild. But you don't see widespread devastation. The Maya weren't aiming for a sterile, bug-free zone, which is an ecologically impossible goal anyway. They were aiming for balance, for resilience. And one of their primary tools was the very biodiversity you see around you. Remember that. Symphony of plants. Growing a wide variety of species together isn't just about having different foods and medicines. It's a powerful form of natural pest control. Some plants naturally repel certain insects with their scent or chemical compounds. Others attract beneficial insects, predators like ladybugs or praying mantises. Okay, maybe not praying mantises specifically known from Mesoamerica, but you get the idea. Beneficial bugs that would happily munch on the pests. It's like creating a tiny, self-policing ecosystem where no single pest can build up overwhelming numbers because its food source is scattered and its natural enemies are close by. It's the ultimate "don't put all your eggs in one basket" strategy, applied to plants and bugs. Much more effective than trying to explain to a leafcutter ant why your basil is off limits. Another natural technique involves specific plant properties. Just as some plants were used for medicine, others were known for their repellent qualities. The strong scent of certain herbs, for instance, might confuse or deter pests looking for their favorite meal. Researchers have documented that plants like epazote, again, or chili peppers themselves might have had repellent effects on some insects, either by direct toxicity or simply making the garden less appealing. You weren't just growing these plants for food or flavor, they were also part of your garden's defense system. It's like having little fragrant bodyguards standing watch over your crops. Manual removal was undoubtedly part of the routine too. Imagine spending time in your garden each day, not just watering and weeding, but also carefully inspecting leaves, picking off caterpillars or other visible pests by hand, and perhaps feeding them to your chickens, if you had them, or simply discarding them away from the garden. It's a tedious job, yes, but a direct and effective one, especially in a smaller domestic plot. It fosters that intimate connection. You know every plant, every leaf, and you can spot trouble early. It's the ancient equivalent of doom scrolling your plant leaves instead of your phone. Remember the ash from the cooking fire we talked about using for soil fertility? That could also play a role in pest control. A light dusting of ash on leaves can deter some soft-bodied insects or snails. It's alkaline and abrasive, not a nice surface for them to crawl over or chew on. Plus, it's recycling. 2 birds, 1 stone, or rather, 1 handful of ash. Now, shift your perspective from the purely practical to the spiritual. For the Maya, everything was imbued with spirit, and the health of the garden was also dependent on maintaining right relationships with the divine forces that govern nature. Pests or blights weren't just biological problems. They could also be seen as signs of spiritual imbalance, perhaps displeased deities or malevolent forces at work. Therefore, protecting the garden involves spiritual practices alongside the natural ones. Mainstream historical fact incoming: Mayan rituals related to agriculture often involved offerings, prayers, and ceremonies aimed at ensuring fertility, sufficient rain. Chak, the rain god, again, and protection from harm, including pests and diseases. These rituals weren't confined to the large milpa fields. They were integral to the domestic space as well. You might make small offerings of food or incense at the edge of your garden, or perform specific blessings over your plants, asking for protection from the creatures that would devour them. It was a way of acknowledging the spiritual dimension of gardening and seeking help from the powers that controlled the natural world. Historians still argue whether the Maya prioritized practical, empirical knowledge of plant properties and ecological interactions for pest control, or if spiritual explanations and ritual practices were considered equally or even more effective in safeguarding the garden's health. Was it about planting marigolds because you knew they smelled bad to bugs, or because a ritual told you they pleased a protective spirit? It's another layer of the complex interplay between the pragmatic and the sacred in their lives. A quirky tidbit: some ethnographic accounts of modern indigenous groups in Mesoamerica, who carry on traditions with ancient roots, describe practices like placing specific stones or amulets in the garden, or using certain sounds or chants believed to ward off harmful spirits or creatures. While direct archaeological evidence for this in ancient Mayan domestic gardens is hard to come by, it hints at the potential for a rich layer of folk belief and ritual associated with protecting the paa-pakau from unseen or spiritual threats, not just physical ones. Imagine putting a little lucky charm next to your tomato plant, but the charm is actually meant to scare away invisible bug demons. This holistic approach meant that dealing with pests wasn't just a chore. It was integrated into their daily life and worldview. You used your knowledge of plants and ecology, your careful observation and manual labor, and you engaged with the spiritual forces that governed the natural world. It was a multi-pronged strategy, acknowledging that challenges would arise and addressing them on multiple levels: the biological, the ecological, and the spiritual. It wasn't about eliminating pests entirely, which is an impossible and ecologically damaging goal. It was about managing them, keeping their populations in check so they didn't decimate your crops. It was about fostering a resilient garden ecosystem that could largely defend itself, supported by human knowledge and spiritual connection. This gentle, integrated approach stands in fascinating contrast to modern methods that often involve broadcasting powerful chemicals designed to kill indiscriminately, disrupting the natural balance and potentially harming other life forms and the environment. As you survey your ancient garden, you appreciate the subtle defenses at play. The mixed planting, the fragrant herbs, the carefully tended soil, all contributing to a system that is less susceptible to overwhelming pest attacks. And you understand that the quiet rituals performed here are just as much a part of the garden's protection as the practical steps taken with your hands. It's a testament to a profound understanding that the health of the garden, like the health of life itself, requires attention on many levels: physical, ecological, and spiritual. You've seen how the gentle art of managing pests in the paa-pakau wasn't about eradication, but about fostering resilience, partly through the sheer variety of life you encouraged. But that biodiversity wasn't just a defense strategy. It was the core principle, the living symphony that made these gardens so incredibly productive and sustainable. Step back and look at your garden again. It's not a neat grid of monoculture, like a modern cornfield stretching to the horizon, or, let's be honest, like my attempt at a minimalist herb garden that usually ends up looking like a crime scene. No, this is vibrant, layered, almost chaotic to an untrained eye, but every plant has a role to play, often multiple roles. Think beyond the iconic three sisters: maize, beans, and squash. They are the foundation, yes, providing the essential calories and protein, and working together in that beautiful synergy we discussed. But they are surrounded, intertwined, and often overshadowed by a dazzling array of other species. You might see different varieties of chili peppers, their bright fruits adding splashes of color. Herbs like epazote, cilantro, or hoja santa, not just for flavor and medicine, but potentially deterring pests or attracting beneficial insects. Root crops like manioc or sweet potatoes sprawling underground, their leaves providing ground cover. The Maya mastered the art of layering, utilizing the vertical space as effectively as the horizontal. Taller plants like maize or small trees, papaya, avocado, cacao, if the climate was right, formed an upper canopy, providing dappled shade for lower growing, shade-tolerant plants. Climbing beans and other vines scrambled up the taller structures, maximizing vertical growth without needing extra support poles. Beneath them, mid-sized plants like peppers, tomatoes, yes, tomatoes are native to the Americas, and various leafy greens thrived in the partial sun. And on the ground, squash vines sprawled, covering the soil and keeping it cool and moist, alongside low-growing herbs and maybe nitrogen-fixing ground covers. It was like a tiny edible jungle, a multi-story food forest packed into a relatively small area. Trying to replicate this in a modern suburban yard would probably require a complex Excel spreadsheet and a serious talk with your homeowners association about overgrown vegetation. This incredible mix wasn't accidental. It was based on centuries of observation and understanding of how different plants interact. This is the heart of companion planting, a concept that feels cutting-edge today but was fundamental to ancient Mayan gardening. Plants were chosen not just for their yield, but for the benefits they provided to their neighbors. The nitrogen fixed by the beans fed the hungry maize. The squash leaves shaded the soil for everyone. Certain herbs might repel insects that targeted the maize. Other plants might attract pollinators necessary for the squash. It was a complex web of relationships, a plant community where everyone helped each other out, like the best kind of ancient potluck dinner. This biodiversity also offered resilience. If one crop failed due to disease or pests, or maybe a particularly clumsy family member stepping on it, you didn't lose your entire food source. There were dozens of other plants to rely on. If the maize harvest was poor, perhaps the manioc or sweet potatoes were abundant. If one herb was wiped out, others were available for medicine or flavor. It was a built-in insurance policy against the unpredictable challenges of tropical agriculture. It's the opposite of putting all your eggs in one basket. It's putting all your eggs in about 50 different, very well-hidden baskets. Mainstream historical fact incoming, Mayan ethnobotanical knowledge was immense. They identified and utilized thousands of plant species for food, medicine, materials, and ceremonial purposes, demonstrating a deep understanding of their properties and ecological roles. This vast knowledge base informed the selection and arrangement of plants in their domestic gardens. Historians still argue whether the specific placement and combination of plants in the pā-pakau were guided purely by practical considerations of yield, pest control, and soil health, or if they also incorporated spiritual beliefs about plant relationships, symbolism, or cosmological order into the garden design. Was it about maximizing space and mutual benefit, or was it also about creating a microcosm of their sacred universe? A quirky tidbit. Some indigenous traditions in Mesoamerica maintain beliefs about specific plant combinations being particularly auspicious or having certain magical properties when grown together, beyond just practical benefits. For instance, certain flowers might be planted alongside food crops not just to attract pollinators, but because they are believed to ward off negative energy or spirits that could harm the harvest. Imagine planting sunflowers not just because they're pretty and attract bees, but because they're believed to scare away plant-eating ghosts. This symphony of plants wasn't just about survival. It was about creating abundance and variety. It provided a richer, more diverse diet than relying solely on the staple crops from the milpa. It offered a continuous harvest of different items throughout the year, providing fresh ingredients for daily meals. It was a living larder that was constantly regenerating, a testament to the power of working with nature's complexity rather than trying to simplify it. And it fostered a deep connection. You knew every plant, its needs, its benefits, its relationship to its neighbors. You understood the intricate dance of life happening right outside your door. It wasn't just a collection of individual plants. It was a community, and you were a part of it, a gentle conductor in this vibrant, edible orchestra. This intricate, multi-layered system stands in stark contrast to the simplified, often fragile monocultures that dominate much of modern agriculture today. The ancient Maya, in their small, serene kitchen gardens, demonstrated a profound understanding of ecological principles that we are only now beginning to fully appreciate and try to replicate. You've felt the rich earth, seen the incredible living tapestry of plants, and understood how this vibrant biodiversity helped protect your garden. But while the plants themselves do a lot of the heavy lifting in this system, you still need a little help from time to time. You need tools. Not the noisy, fuel-guzzling machines of modern agriculture, or even the complex plows of some other ancient civilizations. No, the tools of the ancient Mayan Papaka were, like the garden itself, remarkably simple, elegant, and efficient, designed to work with the earth, not against it. Step into the corner of your dwelling where you keep your implements. What do you see? Probably not a metal shovel or a wheelbarrow. Metal was precious and rare, mostly reserved for ornamentation or warfare, not everyday gardening. Your tools are crafted from the materials readily available in the jungle around you: wood, stone, bone, maybe durable plant fibers. The most essential tool, the absolute workhorse of Mayan agriculture from the largest milpa to the smallest garden, is the digging stick. You pick it up, a sturdy pole, perhaps 3 or 4 feet long, often with one end sharpened or fitted with a fire-hardened point. It feels solid in your hands, smooth from use. This simple stick is your plow, your shovel, your hoe, your planter all rolled into one. You use it to break up soil clods, dig holes for seeds or seedlings, loosen weeds, and even harvest root crops. It requires strength and technique, yes, but it allows for precise work, disturbing the soil minimally and preserving that precious structure you've worked so hard to build. It's the ultimate low-impact gardening tool, proving you don't need horsepower, or any kind of power, really, to prepare the ground effectively. It's the ancient equivalent of saying, "I don't need fancy gym equipment, I've got this really good stick." Beyond the digging stick, what else is in your kit? Perhaps a stone axe or a heavy stone hoe head lashed onto a wooden handle, useful for tougher clearing or breaking ground, though less common in the already established garden space right by the house. More likely you'd have smaller, more specialized tools. Maybe a sharp flake of obsidian or chert, carefully hafted onto a small handle, serving as a knife for cutting plant material or harvesting delicate leaves. You'd have woven baskets of various sizes, essential for carrying soil, compost, harvested crops, or even water if you weren't using gourds. Gourds themselves, grown in your garden or nearby, would be dried and hollowed out to serve as scoops, dippers, or containers for carrying liquids. A piece of bone, perhaps sharpened, might be used for fine weeding or working around delicate roots. These tools weren't mass-produced in a factory somewhere. They were likely made by skilled artisans within the community, or even crafted by you and your family using local knowledge and materials. The process of making and maintaining your tools was part of the rhythm of life, connecting you not just to the plants and the soil, but to the craftsmanship and resources of your environment. You'd learn which type of wood was best for a digging stick, how to sharpen a stone blade, how to weave a sturdy basket. It was DIY before anyone knew what those letters stood for, and much more essential. The efficiency of these tools lay not in speed or scale, but in their appropriateness for the task and the system. They were perfect for working within a dense, multi-layered garden where precision was more important than brute force. They allowed you to navigate between different plants, tend to individual needs, and harvest selectively throughout the season. They were extensions of your hands, allowing for that intimate connection with the earth and the plants you were cultivating. Mainstream historical fact incoming. Archaeological evidence from Mayan sites frequently includes stone tools like axes, adzes, and hoe heads, as well as depictions in art showing people using digging sticks, confirming these were fundamental implements in their agricultural practices, both large and small scale. Historians still argue whether the relative simplicity of Mayan agricultural tools, particularly the reliance on the digging stick over plows, was a limiting factor in their agricultural output compared to civilizations that used animal traction, or if it was a deliberate choice that perfectly suited their tropical environment and polyculture systems by minimizing soil disturbance and erosion. Was it a technological constraint, or an ecological advantage? A quirky tidbit: some ethnographic accounts from modern indigenous communities in Mesoamerica describe the digging stick, often called a COA, as having almost a personality or spirit, being treated with respect and sometimes even given offerings before important planting seasons. While direct evidence from ancient times is elusive, it hints at the possibility that these essential tools were seen as more than just inanimate objects, but as partners in the sacred act of cultivation. Imagine thanking your shovel after a long day, and meaning it. The tools were also incredibly durable and easily reparable or replaceable using local resources. A broken wooden handle could be replaced with a new branch. A dull stone blade could be resharpened or replaced with a new flake. This contrasts sharply with modern tools that often rely on complex manufacturing processes and materials sourced from far away, becoming disposable when they break. Your ancient tools were part of a sustainable cycle, born from the earth and returning to it eventually. Working with these simple tools required physical effort, yes, but it also fostered a different kind of connection. You felt the resistance of the soil through the digging stick, the weight of the harvest in the basket, the sharpness of the obsidian blade as you cut a chili pepper. It was a tangible, physical relationship with the process of growing food. There was no detachment, no layers of machinery between you and the earth. Compare this to the modern gardener with their array of metal tools, plastic hoses, and power equipment. While efficient in terms of time and labor, these tools can also create a distance from the natural world. The ancient Mayan tools, born of the earth and worked with the hands, kept the gardener deeply connected to the cycles of nature and the physical reality of coaxing life from the soil. As you lay your digging stick down at the end of the day, wiping the earth from your hands, you appreciate the quiet efficiency of these simple implements. They are not symbols of technological backwardness, but of ingenious adaptation and a profound understanding of how to work effectively within the constraints and opportunities of their environment. They represent a philosophy of using just what is needed, crafted from what is available, to support a system that is both productive and sustainable. These basic tools, wielded with skill and intention, were the physical link between the Mayan gardener and the vibrant, life-giving heart of their home. You've felt the worn wood of the digging stick, seen how these simple tools were extensions of your hands, connecting you directly to the earth. But even with the best tools and the healthiest soil, you couldn't just grow things whenever you wanted. The ancient Mayan world, especially in the tropical lowlands, was governed by powerful, predictable cycles, the rhythm of the seasons. And your pa'pakal, your intimate garden space, danced to that same ancient beat. Step outside your dwelling again, feel the air. Is it thick and heavy, promising rain? Or dry and dusty, with the sun a relentless eye in the sky? The answer dictates everything you do in your garden. The Mayan calendar, far more complex and accurate than many of its contemporaries, mainstream historical fact incoming, the Maya developed a highly sophisticated calendar system, including the long count, Hab, and Sokin, which tracked astronomical cycles with remarkable precision and were deeply intertwined with their agricultural practices and rituals. Wasn't just for tracking historical events or predicting the end of the world. That was just one interpretation of certain cycles. Chill out. It was a practical guide to life, especially agricultural life. The rhythm of the Sokin, the sacred 260-day calendar, and the Hab, the 365-day solar calendar, aligned with the cycles of rain and sun, telling you when to prepare the soil, when to plant, when to expect the harvest, and when the earth needed to rest. Your life, and the life of your garden, was a continuous flow dictated by these celestial and terrestrial rhythms. It was like having a cosmic gardening app, but instead of push notifications, you got celestial alignments and the wisdom of generations whispered in your ear. The year often began with the dry season winding down. The ground would be hard, the air still. This was a time for preparation. You might use your digging stick to turn over some soil, incorporating fresh organic matter, that precious ash and compost we talked about, to replenish nutrients after the previous season's growth. You'd clear away any remaining stalks from the previous harvest, perhaps leaving some as mulch. This wasn't large-scale plowing. It was careful, localized work, preparing specific beds or areas for the coming rains. It was about getting everything tidy and ready, like cleaning your room before guests arrive, except the guests are tiny seeds and the arrival is a deluge. Then came the most anticipated moment, the arrival of the rains. Chak, the rain god, was arguably one of the most important deities for any Mayan farmer, from the grandest city to the humblest home. The first rains were a cause for celebration, a sign that the cycle was beginning anew. As the soil softened, it was time for planting. With your digging stick, you'd poke holes in the prepared earth, carefully placing seeds, the precious maize kernels, the small, hard beans, the flat, round squash seeds, often planting them together in those synergistic groupings. You'd probably speak to the seeds, offering prayers or blessings, asking for a bountiful harvest. This wasn't just dropping seeds in dirt. It was an act of faith, a partnership with the earth and the divine forces. As the rainy season progressed, the garden exploded with life. This was a time of rapid growth, but also constant work. Weeds, fueled by the same rain that nourished your crops, would spring up everywhere. You'd spend hours carefully weeding, using your hands or maybe a sharpened bone tool, ensuring your precious plants weren't choked out. You'd monitor for pests, using the techniques we discussed, encouraging beneficial insects, maybe dusting with ash, or simply picking them off by hand. The digging stick might be used to loosen soil around roots or build up small mounds to help with drainage during particularly heavy downpours. It was a time of intense tending, of nurturing the young life you had brought forth. Imagine trying to keep up with weeding in a tropical rainforest. It was basically that, but with slightly more edible results. As the plants matured, the rhythm shifted towards harvest. Maize stalks would reach their full height, beans would swell in their pods, squash would ripen on the vine. Harvesting in the pau-paca wasn't a single event like harvesting a large field. It was continuous, selective. You'd pick ripe chili peppers as needed, gather herbs for the evening meal, pluck mature squash, or harvest ears of maize as they dried on the stalk. This staggered harvest provided a steady supply of fresh food throughout the growing season, reducing the need for large-scale storage, though some crops, like dried maize and beans, were certainly stored. It was like having a grocery store where the shelves restocked themselves daily, provided you did the restocking. Historians still argue whether the timing of planting and harvesting in the pau-paca was strictly dictated by the regional calendar and rain patterns, or if the smaller scale and diversity of the house garden allowed for more flexibility and adaptation based on immediate household needs and microclimate conditions. Could you sneak in an extra planting of a fast-growing herb if you needed it, even if the calendar said otherwise? As the dry season returned, the garden's pace would slow. Some plants would die back, their energy returning to the soil. Others, like certain root crops, might be harvested during this time, providing sustenance when other sources were less abundant. This was a period of rest for the earth, and a time for reflection and repair for the gardener. You might mend tools, prepare seeds for the next season, and continue adding organic matter to the soil, building fertility for the cycle to come. It was a necessary pause, acknowledging that even the most productive system needs time to regenerate. It's the ancient version of taking a well-deserved nap after a busy season. A quirky tidbit about this rhythm: some accounts suggest that certain specific days in the Tsokan calendar were considered particularly auspicious or inauspicious for certain gardening tasks. For instance, specific day names or numbers might be seen as ideal for planting maize, while others might be avoided entirely for fear of crop failure or attracting pests. Your gardening schedule might have been influenced not just by the weather, but by complex calendrical calculations and beliefs about the energies associated with each day. Imagine checking your horoscope before deciding whether to plant beans today. This constant dance with the seasons fostered a deep connection to the cycles of life and death, growth and decay. You were intimately aware of the forces that sustained you: the sun, the rain, the fertile earth. Your daily tasks were aligned with the ancient rhythms of the planet. There was no rushing nature, no forcing growth against the natural flow. It was a patient, collaborative process, acknowledging that you were a part of a much larger system. The rhythm of the seasons in the pau-paca wasn't just an agricultural schedule. It was a way of life, woven into the fabric of daily existence, spiritual belief, and community practice. It required observation, patience, and a profound respect for the timing dictated by the natural world. It stands in contrast to modern agriculture's attempts to sometimes override seasonal limitations with technology, highlighting a different philosophy, one of working within the natural cycles, rather than seeking to control or transcend them. Your ancient garden was a living clock, its pulse set by the sun, the moon, and the rain, reminding you daily of your place within the grand, unfolding pattern of life. You've felt the pulse of the seasons, the ancient rhythm dictating the life of your papakal. But that rhythm wasn't played in isolation. Your garden wasn't a sterile box carved out of the wilderness. It was deeply, intimately connected to the vibrant, often imposing tropical environment that surrounded your home. The jungle wasn't just something outside the garden. It was something the garden worked with, and in many ways mimicked. Step just beyond the cultivated edge of your garden, and you feel the shift. The air might become even heavier, the canopy thicker, the sounds of birds and insects louder, more diverse. The boundary between your cultivated space and the wild forest wasn't a sharp line, but a gradient. Useful wild plants were often allowed, even encouraged, to grow at the edges of the garden, or sometimes even within it. Plants that might provide food, medicine, or materials but weren't actively cultivated in the main beds were still part of the usable landscape, a bridge between the domestic and the wild. It was like having a perfectly manicured lawn that just subtly transitioned into a helpful meadow filled with useful herbs and berries, which sounds much nicer than my current lawn situation, which mostly transitions into weeds and existential dread. The very structure of your papakal reflected the jungle's influence. Remember that incredible biodiversity and layering we talked about? The upper canopy of taller plants, the mid-level shrubs, the ground cover? This wasn't just efficient space utilization, it was a conscious or unconscious imitation of the forest structure itself. The jungle is a multi-story ecosystem, with different plants thriving at different levels depending on their light and moisture needs. By replicating this layering in their gardens, the Maya were creating a stable, resilient system that felt familiar and natural within the tropical environment. They weren't trying to force a European-style field into the jungle. They were adapting jungle principles for human benefit. It was like saying, "Okay, nature, you're clearly good at this whole growing things in a forest thing, maybe we'll just copy your homework a little." Working with nature also meant utilizing the resources the jungle provided. The wood for your digging stick, remember that essential tool from Section 8, the fibers for your baskets, the materials for your thatched roof. Much of this came from the surrounding environment. And the garden itself benefited from the natural processes of the forest. Fallen leaves from nearby trees might blow into your garden, adding to that crucial mulch layer. Beneficial insects and pollinators, like those busy bees, would readily move between the wild jungle and your cultivated space, helping your plants thrive and keeping pests in check. Even the architecture of your home, with its thatched roof and open walls, was designed to integrate with the climate, allowing air to circulate and providing shaded areas that might spill into the garden space, blurring the lines between indoor and outdoor living. Mainstream historical fact incoming: the Maya were keen observers of their environment and possessed a sophisticated understanding of forest ecology, recognizing the interconnectedness of plants, animals, soil, and water. This knowledge informed their agricultural practices, including how they managed their domestic gardens in relation to the surrounding forest. Historians still argue whether the integration of the papakal with the surrounding jungle was primarily a pragmatic adaptation to the tropical environment, utilizing available resources and mimicking successful natural systems for efficiency, or if it also stemmed from a deeper philosophical or spiritual belief in the interconnectedness of all life and the sacredness of the forest itself. Were they being practical ecological engineers, or living out a spiritual connection to the wild? A quirky tidbit: some indigenous traditions in Mesoamerica hold beliefs about certain animals from the forest acting as guardians or messengers within the garden space, or that specific trees or rock formations near the garden hold spiritual significance and must be respected. While hard archaeological evidence is scarce for ancient papakal, it suggests the possibility of a rich layer of interaction and belief regarding the wildlife and features surrounding the domestic garden. Imagine seeing a specific bird land in your garden and interpreting it as a sign from the spirits about the upcoming harvest, which definitely adds more excitement than just shooing away a pigeon. This integration also meant managing the challenges posed by the jungle. While beneficial insects might visit, so too might larger animals looking for a meal, deer, peccaries, or even monkeys, depending on the region. You might need to erect simple fences made of thorny branches or woven reeds around your garden to deter these larger creatures. This wasn't about building an impenetrable fortress, but about creating a boundary that signaled this was a human space, while still allowing smaller creatures and natural processes to flow through. It was like putting up a "Please knock before entering" sign, but for wildlife, made out of pointy sticks. The shade provided by nearby jungle trees could also be a factor. While some plants in your garden needed full sun, like maize, others thrived in partial shade. The strategic placement of your garden in relation to existing trees, or even the careful trimming of branches, would have been part of the design, ensuring each plant received the light it needed. It was micromanaging your sunlight distribution using existing natural infrastructure. This constant interplay between the cultivated garden and the wild jungle fostered a deep respect for the power and complexity of nature. You saw firsthand how quickly the jungle could reclaim disturbed land, how vital its resources were, and how its inhabitants could both help and hinder your efforts. It wasn't a battle against the wilderness. It was a negotiation, a partnership. You were drawing sustenance from the earth, but you were doing so within the context of a powerful, dynamic ecosystem that demanded respect and understanding. The serenity of these gardens wasn't just about the quiet hum of life. It was also about the peace that comes from working with natural forces, rather than constantly fighting against them. It was an acknowledgement that the human space was part of the larger natural world, not separate from it. This harmonious integration allowed the pack-out to be not just productive, but also resilient, drawing strength and diversity from the wild environment that pressed in all around it, creating a truly sustainable and deeply connected way of life. You've seen how your garden dances with the seasons, how it harmonizes with the surrounding jungle, drawing strength and resilience from the wild. But all that careful tending, the patient observation, the respectful partnership with the earth, it all culminates in one fundamental, daily act, bringing the bounty of your pack-out into your home, onto your table, into your very body. This is the journey from garden to table, a path that was often just a few steps long, yet represented the culmination of a cycle as ancient as the Maya themselves. Imagine the sun beginning to dip towards the horizon, casting long shadows across your dwelling. The familiar aroma of wood smoke is already in the air, perhaps the scent of maize cooking for the evening meal. It's time to gather the ingredients. You don't need to trek miles to a distant field. You simply step out your door, into the vibrant space we've explored. With a woven basket in hand, or perhaps just the hem of your simple cotton garment, you move through the garden. This isn't a harsh, efficient harvest like you might see in a modern documentary about industrial farming. It's a gentle, selective process. You might pluck a handful of chili peppers, their vibrant reds and greens a stark contrast to the surrounding foliage. You'll gather a few leaves of epazote or cilantro for flavoring the stew simmering on the fire. You might snap a few fresh bean pods, still crisp and green. If it's the right season, you'll select a ripe squash, its skin hard and mottled, or twist a mature ear of maize from its stalk, the dry husks rattling softly. You're not clearing entire rows. You're picking just what you need for tonight, and maybe a little extra for tomorrow. It's like having a personalized, open-air grocery store that's always perfectly stocked with seasonal produce, provided you put in the work. This daily interaction with the garden wasn't just about acquiring food. It was a continuation of the tending, a chance to observe which plants were thriving, which needed attention, and which were ready to give their gifts. You'd notice a pest problem starting, spot a plant that needed more water, or identify seeds that were ready to be saved for the next planting. The harvest was woven into the ongoing care of the garden itself. Once gathered, the food's journey continued into the heart of the home, the cooking area. For most Mayan households, this would have been a simple hearth, perhaps 3 stones supporting a clay griddle or pot over an open fire. The absolute cornerstone of the diet, maize, required significant preparation. Mainstream historical fact incoming. The Maya, like other Mesoamerican cultures, practiced nixtamalization, a process where maize kernels were soaked and cooked in an alkaline solution, typically made with lime, or calcium hydroxide, derived from wood ash or calcine limestone. This process not only made the maize easier to grind but also significantly increased its nutritional value, making niacin, vitamin B3, available, which prevented deficiencies like pellagra. This sophisticated understanding of food chemistry transformed maize from a calorie source into a complete dietary staple. So, the maize harvested, or more likely, taken from storage from the larger milpa, though some might be grown and processed fresh from the paupakal, would undergo this vital process before being ground into a dough, called masa, using a stone matate and mano, grinding stone and hand stone. This was often a communal task, the rhythmic scraping of stone on stone a familiar sound of domestic life. From the masa, endless variations could be created: tortillas, patted flat by hand and cooked on the hot griddle; tamales, steamed in corn husks or plantain leaves, often filled with vegetables or beans from the garden; or various drinks and porridges. The fresh produce from your paupakal added flavor, nutrition, and variety to these maize-based staples. Chili peppers provided heat and vitamins. Squash could be boiled, roasted, or added to stews. Beans, both fresh and dried, were a crucial source of protein, often cooked into a thick soup or paste. Herbs didn't just make food taste better, they were understood to have health benefits, integrating medicine and diet seamlessly. Imagine your modern kitchen, but instead of opening a spice jar, you just step outside and pick fresh episode. Much more satisfying, if slightly less convenient in a blizzard. Historians still argue whether the daily diet of the average Mayan household relied more heavily on the bulk staples produced in the larger milpa fields, primarily dried maize and beans, or if the fresh, diverse, and continuously available produce from the paupakal contributed a proportionally larger amount to the nutritional intake and overall quality of life than previously thought. Was the garden a supplement, or a primary source of essential nutrients and variety? A quirky tidbit: beyond the everyday meals, the paupakal might also provide ingredients for special occasions, feasts, or ceremonial meals. Certain rare herbs, specific varieties of chili, or even small amounts of cacao, if grown in the garden, might be reserved for these important events, linking the domestic garden directly to the social and religious life of the community. Imagine saving your single, precious cacao pod from your backyard plant for a special family celebration. Food preparation was often done within or very near the dwelling, sometimes even in a covered outdoor area adjacent to the garden. This further blurred the lines between the cultivated space and the domestic space. Children would learn to identify plants by helping gather ingredients. Family members would share stories and conversation while grinding maize or preparing vegetables. The entire process, from plucking the chili from the bush to taking the first bite of a tortilla, was integrated into the rhythm of daily life and family connection. It wasn't a separate activity, it was life itself. The journey from garden to table wasn't just about physical sustenance, it was deeply symbolic and spiritual. Eating the food grown with your own hands, nurtured from the sacred earth, was a way of connecting with the divine forces that brought forth life. Each meal was, in a sense, an act of communion, a reminder of your partnership with the earth and the cycles of nature. The food wasn't just fuel, it was a gift, a blessing. Contrast this with our modern food system, where food often travels thousands of miles, its origins are anonymous, and the connection between grower and consumer is virtually non-existent. The ancient Mayan garden-to-table pathway was immediate, transparent, and deeply personal. You knew exactly where your food came from, the effort that went into growing it, and the blessings that were offered for its abundance. This direct connection also meant less waste. You harvested what you needed, when you needed it. Any scraps from food preparation could go right back into the garden as compost, closing the loop entirely. There were no plastic wrappers, no excess packaging, no forgotten produce wilting in the back of the fridge, mostly because they didn't have fridges, but also because they used everything. It was a system built on efficiency, respect, and immediate use. So, as you imagine sitting down to a meal prepared with ingredients fresh from your paupakal, perhaps a steaming bowl of bean soup flavored with epazote, served with warm tortillas and a side of roasted squash, you taste not just the flavors of ancient Mesoamerica, but the essence of a way of life. A life where the source of sustenance was steps away, nurtured with care, harvested with respect, and shared with family. It was a journey measured not in miles, but in the quiet satisfaction of working with the earth, and the simple, profound act of bringing that life-giving bounty to your table. You've tasted the flavors, felt the warmth of the hearth, and understood that bringing food from your paw pack out to the table was a culmination of effort, respect, and deep connection. But while your garden was intimately tied to your household, this entire system didn't exist in isolation. The knowledge, the techniques, the very plants themselves, they weren't just discovered by one person in a vacuum. They were shared, refined, and passed down through generations within the vibrant fabric of the Mayan community. Your garden's success, and the success of countless others, relied heavily on shared wisdom and mutual support. Imagine stepping out of your dwelling, perhaps carrying a basket of ripe chili peppers, and encountering your neighbor. The conversation wouldn't just be about the weather, though rain was always a hot topic, literally and figuratively. It would inevitably drift to the gardens. "How are your squash doing this year?" they might ask. "Have you seen any of those leafcutter ants?" You'd exchange observations, tips, maybe even complaints about a particularly stubborn weed. This informal exchange was a vital part of the learning process. You saw what worked in your neighbor's garden, they saw what worked in yours. You'd swap seeds, perhaps trading a variety of beans you had in abundance for a different type of herb they cultivated. This wasn't just neighborly chat, it was a continuous flow of information, adapting techniques and sharing resources. It was the original garden club, but with higher stakes and probably less complaining about HOA rules, since, no HOAs. Children played in and around the gardens, constantly observing their parents and other adults. They learned the names of plants not from books, but by helping to weed, gather herbs, or shell beans. They absorbed the rhythm of the seasons, the feel of healthy soil, the look of a ripe fruit, simply by being present and participating in the daily tasks. Knowledge wasn't formally taught in a classroom, it was lived, demonstrated, and absorbed through active participation in the garden's life. It was hands-on learning in the most literal sense, minus the permission slips and standardized tests. Beyond the informal exchange, there were likely more structured ways knowledge was shared. Elders, who had accumulated a lifetime of experience, would be repositories of wisdom about specific plant properties, soil types, weather patterns, and the subtle signs of the natural world. They would guide younger generations, teaching them the rituals associated with planting and harvesting, explaining the significance of different plants, and demonstrating effective techniques. This intergenerational transfer of knowledge was absolutely crucial for the continuity of these sustainable practices. Imagine your grandparent teaching you how to compost, but their composting technique involved chanting and specific moon phases. Mainstream historical fact incoming, ethno-historical accounts and modern ethnographic studies of indigenous communities in Mesoamerica highlight the importance of oral tradition and practical apprenticeship in transmitting agricultural knowledge, including complex information about plant varieties, ecological interactions, and ceremonial practices related to cultivation. Historians still argue whether the specific knowledge about domestic gardens was primarily localized within individual families, passed strictly from parent to child, or if there was a broader, community-wide understanding and sharing of these techniques that transcended individual households. Was your garden knowledge a family's secret recipe, or was it part of a shared community cookbook? The shared spiritual beliefs also played a role in community cohesion around gardening. Rituals and ceremonies related to agriculture, seeking favor from deities like Chak, remember him, the rain god, or Yumcox, god of the forest and wild plants, were often performed collectively, either at a community level or within extended family groups. Participating in these shared practices reinforced the common understanding of the sacredness of the earth and the importance of working together to ensure the community's well-being. It was like having a community potluck where everyone brought dishes made from their garden, and then you all did a rain dance together before eating. Think back to those shared tools we discussed. Remember the digging stick from Section 8? While individual households had their own implements, certain tasks might require borrowing or sharing tools. Larger projects, like perhaps building a new raised bed or reinforcing a garden boundary, might involve neighbors helping each other out. This mutual aid strengthened community bonds and ensured that everyone had the support they needed to maintain their productive gardens. It was the ancient version of borrowing a cup of sugar, but maybe it was borrowing a stone axe head or a particularly good basket weaver. A quirky tidbit: some researchers speculate that specific plants or seed varieties might have been associated with particular families or lineages within a community, and the exchange of these seeds through marriage or trade could have been a way of building alliances and sharing genetic diversity across the community, adding another layer to the social role of garden plants. Imagine your family being known for growing the best, spiciest chili peppers, and trading them with the family known for their particularly hardy squash seeds, a botanical alliance. This emphasis on community and shared knowledge fostered a sense of collective responsibility for the land and its bounty. While the paw-pack-owl was a private space, its health contributed to the overall resilience and food security of the community. A thriving network of diverse, productive house gardens meant that even if the larger milpa harvest was poor one year, the community had a buffer, a decentralized food source right at their doorsteps. The knowledge sharing wasn't static, it was dynamic. New techniques would be tried, new plants incorporated, perhaps learned about through trade with other regions, and the collective wisdom would adapt over time. This constant learning and adaptation, driven by both individual ingenuity and community exchange, was key to the long-term sustainability of their gardening practices. It was like a perpetual beta test for gardening techniques, with everyone sharing their results. Contrast this with modern agricultural knowledge, which is often siloed in research institutions, disseminated through publications or corporate extensions, and sometimes proprietary. The ancient Mayan system was decentralized, open source, and deeply integrated into the social fabric. Knowledge wasn't owned, it was shared, benefiting everyone. This community aspect also added another layer of serenity to the gardening process. You weren't just working alone, you were part of a larger network. You could rely on your neighbors for advice or help, celebrate successful harvests together, and mourn crop failures collectively. The challenges and triumphs of the garden were shared experiences, reinforcing bonds and creating a sense of belonging. So, as you tend your ancient garden, you feel the presence not just of the plants and the earth, but of the community around you. You know that the techniques you use were learned from elders, the seeds you plant might have been shared by a neighbor, and the knowledge you gain will be passed on in turn. The paw-pack-owl wasn't just a personal space of cultivation, it was a node in a network of shared wisdom, community support, and collective resilience, demonstrating that true sustainability isn't just about individual effort, but about the strength and knowledge found in working together. You've seen how your garden was a hub of shared knowledge, a place where wisdom flowed freely between neighbors and generations, strengthening the community. It was a system built on connection to the earth, to the plants, to the cycles of nature, and to the people around you. Now, let's take a deep breath, ease ourselves out of that ancient tranquility for a moment, and cast our gaze forward, all the way to the present day, to the vast, complex, and often jarring landscape of modern industrial agriculture. The contrast couldn't be starker. Imagine leaving your serene paw-pack-owl and suddenly finding yourself standing on the edge of a massive field, stretching further than the eye can see. Not a vibrant tapestry of dozens of different plants, but row upon row, mile upon mile, of just one thing. Maybe it's corn, or soybeans, or wheat. This is monoculture, the absolute opposite of the biodiversity you saw in your garden. While incredibly efficient for large-scale production and harvesting with machinery, it creates a fragile ecosystem. If a pest or disease arrives that targets that one specific crop, the entire field is vulnerable, like putting all your eggs in one giant, exposed basket. Remember how your mixed garden helped deter pests naturally? This system relies on different methods. Instead of recycling every scrap of organic waste back into the soil right where it falls, modern industrial agriculture often relies on vast inputs of synthetic fertilizers, manufactured far away, powered by fossil fuels. Nutrients are mined or synthesized, transported, and applied to the fields to force growth, rather than being patiently built up through decomposition and nutrient cycling on site. The soil isn't necessarily nurtured as a living entity. It's often treated more like a substrate to hold the plants upright, while they're fed chemically. It's like feeding a plant through and for drip instead of giving it a balanced diet derived from healthy soil life. much less charming, and arguably less sustainable in the long run. Water management is also on a vastly different scale. Instead of relying on capturing rainwater with healthy soil and mulch, or small-scale diversion, modern farms often use massive irrigation systems, drawing water from rivers, lakes, or underground aquifers, sometimes over vast distances. While incredibly effective at delivering water precisely where and when it's needed, it can also strain water resources, lead to salinization in some areas, and requires significant energy to pump and distribute. Remember those clever raised beds and mulching techniques in your garden? Simple, low-tech, localized water wisdom versus giant sprinklers and complex plumbing. Both get the job done, but the scale and impact are worlds apart. And pest control? Forget encouraging beneficial insects with a symphony of plants or carefully picking off bugs by hand. Modern industrial farms often rely on broad-spectrum pesticides, sprayed from tractors or even airplanes, designed to kill the insects that threaten the monoculture crop. While effective at protecting the yield, these chemicals can also kill beneficial insects, harm pollinators, like those busy bees, contaminate water sources, and pose risks to wildlife and human health. It's a far cry from the ancient Mayan approach of fostering a resilient ecosystem that largely policed itself. It's the difference between inviting a few helpful friends over to deal with a problem and just carpet bombing the entire neighborhood just in case. The tools have changed beyond recognition. Your simple digging stick, stone blades, and woven baskets have been replaced by tractors, plows, combines, and a dizzying array of specialized machinery. These tools allow for farming on an unimaginable scale, cultivating and harvesting vast areas with minimal human labor per acre. But they also require significant energy, often compact the soil, and create a detachment between the farmer and the earth. You aren't feeling the soil through a digging stick, you're sitting in an air-conditioned cab, operating complex controls. The connection is different, less immediate, less sensory. It's like communicating via email instead of having a face-to-face conversation, efficient, but lacking that personal connection. Mainstream historical fact incoming. The Green Revolution of the mid-20th century dramatically increased global food production through the adoption of high-yielding crop varieties, synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, and irrigation, fundamentally changing agriculture worldwide and enabling the feeding of a rapidly growing global population, but also leading to significant environmental challenges. Historians still argue whether the trajectory of agricultural development towards large-scale, input-intensive methods was an inevitable consequence of population growth and technological advancement, or if alternative paths focused on ecological integration and smaller-scale resilience could have been pursued and sustained large populations if different societal and economic choices had been made. Was industrial agriculture the only way forward, or just a way forward? A quirky tidbit: some modern, precision agriculture techniques use satellite imagery, GPS, and complex sensors to monitor crop health, soil conditions, and even individual plant needs, allowing farmers to apply inputs like water and fertilizer with unprecedented accuracy. It's a fascinating blend of high-tech data analysis applied to the ancient practice of growing food, a stark contrast to the observational knowledge of the ancient Maya, but perhaps sharing a goal of optimizing resources, albeit through vastly different means. Imagine using a drone to check if your squash needs water instead of just looking at its leaves. The relationship with time and seasons is also different. While industrial farming is still subject to climate, technology allows for some mitigation of seasonal limitations through irrigation, greenhouses, and global transport networks that bring food from different climates year-round. The ancient Mayan reliance on the specific, local rhythm of rain and sun, and their continuous, selective harvest from the garden, feels incredibly tied to place compared to a system where tomatoes grown in one hemisphere are flown to a supermarket in another during that region's winter. And the connection to community and knowledge? While modern farmers certainly share information and belong to professional networks, the vast, often corporate-driven structure of industrial agriculture can sometimes feel less integrated into the immediate social fabric compared to the ancient Mayan system where gardening knowledge was passed down through families and shared organically among neighbors. Food production can become an anonymous process, detached from the people who eat it and often from the people who grow it, especially with complex supply chains. You don't necessarily know the farmer who grew your cornflakes, let alone swap seeds with them. This contrast isn't about romanticizing the past or demonizing the present. Both systems arose from the needs and technologies of their time. The ancient Mayan methods were perfectly adapted to their environment, their social structure, and their worldview, enabling sustainable food production within those constraints. Modern industrial agriculture feeds billions, a remarkable achievement, but it comes with its own set of environmental and social costs that the ancient Mayan system, at its scale, largely avoided. The serenity of the ancient Mayan garden came from its integration, its scale, its cyclical nature, and its deep connection to life, both plant, animal, and human. It was a system of gentle cultivation, working with nature, not trying to dominate it. Modern agriculture, born of different pressures and powered by different technologies, often feels like a force applied to nature, seeking control and maximum output. As you contemplate this vast difference, from the quiet hum of life in your ancient paw-pack-owl to the thrumming machinery and endless rows of a modern farm, you see two fundamentally different philosophies at play. One focused on nurturing a complex, resilient, localized ecosystem tied to community and spirituality. The other focused on maximizing yield through simplification, external inputs, and technological control. The ancient Mayan approach, while unable to feed today's global population on its own, offers powerful lessons in sustainability, resilience, and the profound value of connection, lessons that feel incredibly relevant as we grapple with the challenges of feeding the future in a way that respects the earth. You've seen the stark contrast between the serene, integrated world of your ancient paw-pack-owl and the vast, input-heavy landscape of modern industrial agriculture. While that industrial system feeds billions, its environmental footprint and detachment from natural cycles have led many to search for alternative ways of growing food, ways that feel gentler, more in harmony with the earth. And surprisingly, many of the principles guiding these modern sustainable movements echo the quiet wisdom practiced in those ancient Mayan kitchen gardens thousands of years ago. Step back into the mindset of today, look around at the growing interest in things like organic farming, regenerative agriculture, and especially permaculture. Permaculture, a design system for creating sustainable human habitats and food production systems, often emphasizes working with nature rather than against it. Does that sound familiar? It should. Many of its core tenets feel like they could have been lifted directly from an ancient Mayan gardening manual, if they'd had manuals, which they didn't, they just had elders and dirt. Think about the incredible biodiversity of your paw-pack-owl, that layered symphony of plants we explored. Remember Section 7? Modern permaculture design places a huge emphasis on polyculture and stacking functions, growing a wide variety of plants together that support each other, creating a resilient ecosystem. Just like the three sisters, maize, beans, and squash, working in harmony, permaculture encourages companion planting, using plants to repel pests, attract beneficial insects, build soil, and provide different yields throughout the year. It's the same fundamental idea: complexity equals resilience. Trying to explain the concept of guilds in permaculture, groups of plants that work together synergistically, feels very much like describing how your ancient garden was a community of helpful plants, just with less academic jargon and probably more delicious snacks readily available. And what about soil? Remember how the Maya meticulously recycled organic waste, built up fertility, and mulched the ground? Section 4? Regenerative agriculture and permaculture are obsessed with soil health. They advocate for composting, cover cropping, minimum tillage, like your digging stick, and heavy mulching to build rich, living soil that holds water and nutrients naturally. They understand, just as the ancient Maya did, that healthy soil is the foundation of a healthy garden and a healthy planet. They call it feeding the soil, not the plant, which is basically just a modern marketing slogan for don't throw away that ash, put it on the dirt. Water management is another clear parallel. While modern techniques might involve swales, rain gardens, and complex water harvesting systems, the underlying principle of capturing, storing, and using water efficiently on site resonates strongly with the ancient Mayan methods of using raised beds, healthy, spongy soil, and mulch to conserve precious moisture. Section 5. It's about designing the landscape to work with the flow of water, ensuring resilience during both droughts and floods, just on different scales and with different materials. The emphasis on using local resources and minimizing external inputs in permaculture also harks back to the ancient Papakal. Your tools were made from local wood and stone. Section 8. Your fertilizer was derived from household waste. Your pest control relied on natural plant properties and biodiversity. Section 6. Modern permaculture encourages sourcing materials locally, closing nutrient loops, like composting, and relying on ecological processes rather than synthetic chemicals. It's about working with what you have, where you are, just like the Maya did out of necessity, but now championed as a conscious choice for sustainability. Mainstream historical fact incoming, permaculture, as a formalized concept, was developed in the 1970s by Bill Mollison and David Holmgren in Australia, drawing inspiration from traditional agricultural systems, indigenous land management practices, and observations of natural ecosystems, explicitly seeking alternatives to industrial agriculture. Historians still argue whether modern permaculture and similar movements truly capture the holistic nature of ancient indigenous practices, including the spiritual and social dimensions, or if they primarily adopt the practical ecological techniques while leaving behind crucial cultural contexts. Is it possible to separate the sustainable farming methods from the worldview that created them? A quirky tidbit: some permaculture practitioners today actively study traditional indigenous agricultural systems from around the world, including those of Mesoamerica, seeking to learn directly from centuries of accumulated ecological wisdom that predates modern science. They might try to replicate planting patterns, use specific heirloom varieties, or even adapt traditional tools and techniques, creating a direct, albeit often romanticized, link to the past. Imagine a permaculture workshop where they teach you how to use a digging stick and explain the benefits of planting beans after consulting an ancient calendar. The focus on resilience and long-term sustainability is perhaps the strongest link. The ancient Mayan garden was designed to provide for the household year after year, adapting to the rhythm of the seasons, Section 9, and integrating with the surrounding jungle, Section 10. Modern sustainable agriculture aims for similar long-term productivity and ecological health, seeking to create systems that can sustain future generations without depleting resources or damaging the environment. It's a fundamental shift from short-term maximum yield to long-term ecological integrity and human well-being. And what about the community aspect? Remember how knowledge was shared and neighbors helped each other in the Mayan system, Section 12? Modern sustainable movements often emphasize community gardens, seed-saving networks, farmers' markets that connect growers and consumers, and open-source sharing of information. There's a recognition that building a more sustainable food system isn't just about individual gardens. It's about reconnecting people to food production and fostering collaboration and shared knowledge, echoing that ancient sense of collective responsibility. It's the ancient garden club principle, scaled up and given a hashtag. This isn't to say modern permaculture is identical to ancient Mayan gardening. Technology, global context, and societal structures are vastly different. Permaculture also incorporates concepts that the ancient Maya wouldn't have had, like zoning, energy efficiency in buildings, or specific design methodologies. But the underlying philosophy of observing nature, working with its patterns, fostering biodiversity, building healthy soil, conserving resources, and creating resilient, integrated systems, is remarkably similar. The echoes of the ancient Mayan kitchen garden are loud and clear in today's sustainable movements. They serve as a powerful reminder that many of the innovations in sustainable agriculture are not new at all, but rather rediscoveries of wisdom honed over millennia by people who lived intimately with the land. The serenity you felt in that ancient space wasn't just a feeling. It was the byproduct of a system designed for gentle cultivation, resilience, and deep connection. And seeing these principles reflected in modern movements offers a sense of hope, suggesting that the path towards a more sustainable future might involve looking back, learning from the quiet, effective ways the earth was nurtured right outside the door, thousands of years ago. You've seen how the quiet wisdom of your ancient pakal echoes in the sustainable practices of today, how modern movements are rediscovering principles honed millennia ago right outside your door. But beyond the specific techniques, what is the enduring legacy of these serene, sustainable kitchen gardens? What profound lessons do they offer us, squinting at screens and navigating complex food systems in the 21st century? As you stand one last time at the edge of your ancient garden, feeling the cool, damp earth beneath your bare feet, you understand that the legacy isn't just about how they grew food. It's about how they lived with the earth. It's a legacy of gentle cultivation, of working with nature's rhythms and complexities, rather than trying to impose a rigid, simplified order upon it. The first lesson is perhaps the most obvious, yet the most overlooked in much of modern agriculture: the power of biodiversity. Your garden wasn't a monoculture, it was a thriving, multi-species community. This complexity wasn't just productive, it was resilient. It provided a diverse diet, continuous harvest, natural pest control, and built-in insurance against crop failure. In a world increasingly aware of the fragility of simplified ecosystems and supply chains, the ancient Mayan garden stands as a powerful testament to the strength found in diversity. It's like they knew that having 50 different types of snacks available meant you'd never go hungry, even if you ran out of your favorite, which, let's be honest, is always the worst. Then there's the lesson of closing the loop. The meticulous recycling of organic waste, turning household scraps and plant residues back into fertile soil, is a concept we are frantically trying to relearn today with composting and circular economy initiatives. The Maya did it instinctively, out of necessity and ingenuity, creating pockets of intense fertility without importing external inputs. Their garden was a small, self-sustaining cycle of growth and decay, a model of efficiency that minimized waste and maximized resource use. Imagine if your kitchen trash bin automatically turned into nutrient-rich soil for your houseplants. That's basically what they achieved, but on a larger scale and with more dirt under the fingernails. The mastery of water, too, offers enduring wisdom. Their techniques weren't about brute force irrigation, but about intelligent design, building soil structure, using mulch, creating subtle contours to capture and manage precious rainfall. It was about working with the water cycle, making the land itself a sponge and a reservoir, ensuring resilience in the face of unpredictable weather. As we face increasing challenges with water scarcity and extreme weather events globally, their low-tech, ecologically integrated methods of water management feel remarkably prescient. The simplicity and appropriateness of their tools also hold a lesson. The digging stick wasn't a sign of technological backwardness. It was a tool perfectly suited to their environment and their polyculture system, allowing for precise work with minimal soil disturbance. It speaks to the value of using tools that are right for the job and the context, crafted from local materials, fostering a direct connection between the gardener and the earth. Sometimes, the simplest solution, like a really good stick, is the best one. Their profound connection to the rhythm of the seasons and their integration with the surrounding jungle teach us about living within natural limits and drawing strength from the wider ecosystem. They didn't try to conquer nature, they sought to understand it, work within its cycles, and learn from its patterns. This philosophy of integration, of blurring the lines between the cultivated and the wild, stands in stark contrast to modern approaches that often seek to control and separate human activity from the natural world. And let's not forget the community aspect. The sharing of knowledge, seeds, and labor wasn't just practical, it built social resilience. In a world increasingly fragmented, the ancient Mayan model of collective wisdom and mutual support around food production reminds us that growing food can be a powerful way to connect people and strengthen communities. Your neighbor's thriving garden wasn't a threat, it was part of the collective security. Mainstream historical fact incoming. While the collapse of classic Mayan civilization was multifaceted and complex, involving factors like climate change, specifically prolonged droughts, warfare, and political instability, some theories suggest that unsustainable agricultural practices in certain regions, particularly large-scale deforestation and soil degradation associated with intensive milpa cultivation to support dense urban populations, may have played a contributing role. highlighting that even sophisticated ancient systems faced environmental limits, but the resilience of house gardens likely provided a crucial buffer for individual households. Historians still argue whether the relative environmental sustainability observed in the Pa-Pakal system was a primary driver of its design, reflecting a conscious ecological philosophy, or if it was simply a highly effective adaptation that emerged organically from the constraints and opportunities of their domestic context and available technology. Was sustainability the goal, or a happy consequence? A quirky tidbit about their legacy: many of the plant species first domesticated or intensively cultivated by the ancient Mayan systems like the Pa-Pakal, including maize, beans, squash, chili peppers, tomatoes, avocado, and cacao, are now staple crops grown and consumed globally, a direct botanical legacy of their ancient agricultural wisdom and the biodiversity they fostered. Imagine trying to cook anything without at least three things the Maya gave the world. The serenity we imagined in these gardens wasn't just a romantic notion. It was likely a reflection of a system that, at the household level, was largely in balance with its environment. There was less reliance on unpredictable external factors, a direct relationship with the source of sustenance, and a daily engagement with the cycles of life. It was a way of living that fostered connection, resilience, and a quiet sense of security right at your doorstep. The enduring lessons from the ancient Mayan kitchen gardens are not about replicating their lives precisely. That would be impossible and impractical. They are about the underlying principles: work with nature, not against it, value diversity, recycle everything, build healthy soil, conserve resources, share knowledge, find the sacred in the everyday act of growing food. These principles are timeless, universal, and perhaps more urgent now than ever before. As you let go of the image of the ancient garden, allowing the jungle sounds to fade and the scent of damp earth to recede, carry with you the feeling of that gentle cultivation. The quiet hum of life, the layered complexity, the sense of deep connection. It's a powerful reminder that sustainable, serene ways of living with the earth are not a futuristic fantasy, but a wisdom rooted in the ancient past, waiting for us to remember and re-embrace. Now, as the journey through the ancient gardens comes to a close, feel the quiet settle in. The images begin to soften, the sounds of the jungle fade into the distance. The warmth of the tropical sun gives way to the cool, calm air around you now. Let the feeling of that rich, living earth underfoot gently recede. The vibrant greens, the rustling leaves, the quiet hum of ancient life, they are memories now, settling softly in your mind. There's nothing more to tend, no more water to carry, no more weeds to pull. The work is done, the lessons learned, the journey complete. Just the sense of peace that comes from connecting with a time when life and the land were so deeply intertwined. The ancient garden sleeps now, and perhaps so should you. Let your breath deepen, slow and steady. Feel yourself drift, peaceful and calm. All is quiet now. Just rest.